I don't know how they could expect that after all of this time, we would still just be silent.
Prince Harry, okay? Half in, half out. Can we shake it all about? Well, what is this all about?
Our children, Archie and Lily, are just 6 and 4 years old.
For years, Buckingham Palace stayed silent. Not the kind of silence you barely notice, the kind that speaks volumes. People kept asking the same questions over and over. Why weren't Archie and Lilibet at royal events? Where were they in the official portraits? Why did it feel like the palace was acting like these kids weren't part of the picture? No answers came, just silence. But here's the thing. That silence wasn't about ignoring the question. It was about waiting for the right moment to answer it. And when that moment came, the palace didn't make an announcement or hold a press conference. They just quietly started taking names out of the royal registry, not suspended, not on hold, just gone. And once you understand why they did it, you'll realize this was never about Harry and Meghan. It was about a century-old tradition that's been keeping royal titles exclusive. So let's talk about what really happened behind those palace walls, because this story goes way deeper than anyone's been telling you. But before we dive in, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because what's coming next is going to blow your mind. If you think you know this story, trust me, you don't. So smash that like button and let's get into it. So let's start with what everyone noticed, but nobody could quite explain. For years, literal years, Buckingham Palace just didn't talk about Archie and Lilibet. And I'm not talking about the usual royal discretion. I'm talking about a silence so loud it became its own story. Every time there was a big royal event, people would scan the photos looking for those kids. Every official portrait, every palace gathering, every ceremony. Archie and Lilibet just weren't there, and this wasn't normal. Not even close. Look at how the palace treated every other royal child. William and Kate's kids, front and center at everything. Birthday portraits released like clockwork. The palace made sure the world saw those children grow up in real time.
Neat card from my kids and my husband saying, "We're so proud of you, Mama, and congrats on the show."
Royal children aren't hidden away. They're showcased, documented, woven into the fabric of royal history from day one. But with Archie and Lilibet, complete radio silence. The palace has always been deliberate about including every royal child in these moments. That's how they show the world who's part of the family. Every appearance, every portrait, every official mention, it all adds up to one message. This child is ours. But with Harry and Meghan's kids, nothing empty spaces where their names should have been. Reporters started asking questions. Royal watchers tried to make sense of it. The public kept wondering what was going on. And the palace, they just kept that same stone-cold silence going. No explanations, no statements, not even a, "We'll address this later," just silence. Now get this, in any other family, silence might mean nothing. But this is the British monarchy, where every tiny detail is recorded and archived for history. When a royal baby is born, there's a golden easel outside the palace. When they're christened, there's an official ceremony with photos. When they turn 1, 2, 3, the palace puts out statements and portraits. It's all part of how things work. So when things suddenly go silent for 2 specific children, that's not an accident, that's intentional. The palace follows traditions that are centuries old. They don't just forget about royal children or accidentally leave them out. Everything they do or don't do is deliberate. And here's what makes that silence so important. In the royal world, silence isn't neutral. It's a choice. It's a statement without words. When the palace doesn't claim something, doesn't acknowledge something, doesn't put something on record, that absence becomes the answer. It's like when someone doesn't show up to a family gathering. The empty chair speaks for itself. People didn't want to believe it at first.
Everything that Prince Harry does gets an undue amount of attention.
Maybe the palace was just being respectful. Maybe they were waiting for the right time. But months turned into years, and that explanation never came. The silence just kept stretching out, getting heavier with every royal event that passed. The palace wasn't ignoring the questions. They were already giving their response. People just didn't realize it yet. Because in the monarchy's world, what you don't say is just as powerful as what you do say. The silence was the answer. Now here's where it gets interesting. To understand why the palace could stay silent and still make their point, you've got to go back to 1917. Picture this. Britain's in the middle of World War I, tensions were high, and the royal family's sitting on a throne that's starting to feel shaky. The British royals had all these connections to European monarchies, German ones especially. During a war against Germany, not a good look, King George V had a problem. He needed to protect the crown and make sure the royal bloodline stayed clean and recognizable. He couldn't just let anyone claim they were part of the family royal titles, meant something, power, money, a place in history. He had to draw a line somewhere. That's when he created the Letters Patent of 1917. This thing laid out the rules for who gets to be called prince or princess. And these weren't suggestions. These were requirements that every single royal birth had to follow. No exceptions, no wiggle room. 3 things had to happen for a child to get that prince or princess title. First, legitimate royal bloodline. Second, the birth had to be officially recognized by the palace doctors, palace announcements, palace records, the whole official process. And third, the child had to be baptized in the Church of England. That last one's important.
I think the mood music has been for some time now, at least a year, that there is reconciliation is the goal, it is the aim.
The British monarch isn't just a figurehead, they're also the head of the Church of England. So if a royal child isn't connected to that church through baptism, they're not really connected to the throne. It's the spiritual link that ties everything together. These 3 requirements were about keeping things clear, making sure royal titles stayed exclusive, that the bloodline stayed traceable, that every prince and princess could show their connection to the crown. King George V didn't want any confusion or gray areas. And get this, for over 100 years, these rules worked perfectly. Every single royal birth followed them to the letter. When a baby was born, the palace doctor was there. The announcement went up on that golden easel. The baptism happened at a royal chapel. Everything was documented and filed away. That's how they kept track of the bloodline. Princess Anne's kids followed the rules. Prince Andrew's daughters followed the rules. Even minor royals nobody talks about, they all followed these exact same requirements because that's just how it worked. If you wanted your child recognized as royal, you played by the century-old playbook. The palace didn't have to push these rules hard because nobody challenged them. Everyone just did it. It was understood. But then something happened that King George V probably never saw coming. What happens when a royal couple decides to do things their own way? What happens when the birth doesn't happen in Britain, the baptism doesn't happen in a Church of England chapel, and the palace isn't part of the process? That's when those 100-year-old rules suddenly became very, very relevant again. So now we get to the part where things start getting really strange. May 2019, Archie Harrison is born and the world goes wild. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Normal royal baby. Normal celebration. Except it wasn't normal. Here's what happened. When Archie was born, his birth certificate was filed with all the usual information.
There was a time when Prince Harry was saying the royal family should apologize to me.
Under the mother's name, it said Rachel Meghan Markle. Her full legal name, nothing unusual. Just her actual name on an official document. But then, weeks later, something weird happened. That birth certificate was quietly changed. No press release, no explanation. It just happened. Someone went into the official records and made an edit. Rachel Meghan Markle disappeared, gone, and in its place appeared Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. No personal name, just a title, just a formal royal designation. Now get this. When reporters discovered the change, chaos followed. This wasn't some typo correction. This was a complete rewrite of who Archie's mother was on his official birth record. Meghan's team said one thing. According to them, palace officials pushed for the change. They said the palace wanted the title on there instead of her name. But palace aides had a completely different story. They said they had nothing to do with it. They pointed the finger right back at Meghan and Harry. So you've got two completely opposite versions, both sides saying the other one did it. And neither side could show exactly what happened or why. Just two conflicting stories in a birth certificate that had been mysteriously altered. Listen, in most situations, changing a name on a document might not be a huge deal, but this is a royal birth certificate. In the royal world, these documents aren't just paperwork, they're history. Every royal birth certificate gets filed away in the archives. Future generations look at these records to trace the family line. These documents don't just matter today, they matter forever. So, when you go back and change one, you're not just fixing a mistake, you're literally rewriting history.
They have these little moments where it comes out, because they have very American accents, but they say words that are just like him, and I think it's adorable.
And here's where it gets wild. This wasn't just about Meghan's name preference, this was about Archie's record. When you look at that birth certificate now, you don't see his mother listed as a person with a name, you see a title. It makes the document feel less personal, more formal. It emphasizes the royal connection instead of the human one. Was this about style and formality like some people said? Or was this about positioning Archie differently in the royal records from the very beginning? Because once you alter a royal birth certificate, once you change the official historical record, you can't take it back. That change is permanent. That altered birth certificate was the first crack in the foundation, the first sign that something was off, the first hint that the palace might not be treating these children the same way they treated every other royal child. And once a crack appears, it doesn't just sit there. It spreads. If Archie's birth certificate raised eyebrows, what happened with Lilibet's birth made those eyebrows shoot straight off people's faces. June 2021. Meghan gives birth to a baby girl. They name her Lilibet Diana after Queen Elizabeth's childhood nickname and Harry's late mother beautiful name, heavy with meaning. You'd think that would have been the perfect moment for the palace to embrace this new addition, right? Wrong. When Lilibet was born, she wasn't born in London with royal doctors. She was born in California, Santa Barbara, thousands of miles away from Buckingham Palace, from the royal doctors, from the whole traditional setup. And the announcement, it didn't come from the palace. There was no golden easel, no official statement from the royal press office. Instead, the news came straight from Harry and Meghan's own team, a cheerful press release, like a regular birth announcement.
The story is, how does he fit in with the royal family at the moment? Is Meghan going to come over next time? Will the kids be coming back to the UK?
Now listen, if you're not deep into royal watching, that might not sound like a big deal. But in the royal world, this was massive. Because for hundreds of years, every single royal birth followed the same script. Here's how it's supposed to work. A royal doctor has to be present, or at least confirm all the details. Then the palace makes the announcement they confirm everything. They put it on that fancy easel outside Buckingham Palace. They file it in the royal records. This system is about documentation. Having an official witness who can say, yes, this birth happened, here's when it happened, here's who the baby is. That's how they've tracked the royal family tree for centuries. Every birth officially witnessed, officially recorded, all filed away. It's about keeping the bloodline clear and traceable. But with Lilibet, none of that happened. No royal doctor present, no palace announcement, no official easel, just Harry and Meghan announcing, we had a baby girl, here's her name, here's when she was born. And the palace, they said nothing, no congratulations, no official acknowledgement, no statement, just complete and total silence. Get this, for every other royal birth in recent history, the palace has been right there. When William and Kate had their kids, the palace was all over it. Statements, photos, official records. Even for distant royals, the palace still made official announcements, still kept records. But for Lilibet, they just didn't. They didn't claim the birth. They didn't add it to their records. They didn't treat it like a royal event. They treated it like it didn't concern them at all. Think about what that means. Without palace confirmation, without royal doctors, without official records, Lilibet's birth exists, obviously, but it doesn't exist in the royal system. There's no palace paperwork connecting her to the crown. Just a California birth certificate and a press release from her parents' team. The palace wasn't being mean or petty by staying silent. They were following the same century-old rules that have always existed. No royal doctor, no official documentation born outside of their traditional process, not part of their records. It's that simple and that brutal. While Meghan and Harry could announce Lilibet's birth to the whole world without the palace's recognition, none of that mattered in terms of royal status.
In many ways, his trip back to the UK recently was to show Prince William that he could take some of the weight off him.
The palace's silence meant one thing. As far as they were concerned, this birth didn't happen within their world. It happened outside of it. So now you've got Archie with a changed birth certificate that raised questions, and Lilibet with a birth that the palace never acknowledged at all. 2 children, 2 situations where the traditional royal documentation process got bypassed or changed, and the palace just kept watching, kept saying nothing, kept letting the gaps in the official records speak for themselves. Okay, so we've got a changed birth certificate for Archie and an unacknowledged birth for Lilibet. But wait, there's more. The third requirement from that 1917 tradition, the Church of England baptism, that's where things got even messier. A few months after Lilibet was born, Meghan talked about the baptism. It sounded beautiful. Intimate ceremony in California, family gathered around, prayers and blessings, photos were released showing this lovely private moment. And honestly, it did sound lovely. That's what most families do. But the palace wasn't looking at this as a sweet family moment. In the royal world, a baptism isn't just a baptism. It's an official connection that ties a royal child to the Church of England, and through that church, to the throne itself. The British monarch is the supreme governor of the Church of England. So when you're talking about royal children, their connection to that church matters a lot. Here's how it's always worked. Royal babies get baptized in a Church of England chapel. Windsor Castle, Westminster Abbey, official ceremony, Church of England clergy, everything documented and recorded in the church books. It becomes permanent documentation connecting that child to the monarchy. Without that link, a child might be baptized, might be blessed, but they're not connected to the royal tradition. When Meghan talked about Lilibet's California baptism, the palace noticed something. No Church of England involvement, no Anglican clergy, no recording in the church books, just a private ceremony in California. From what the palace noticed, that California baptism was never recorded with the Church of England. And in the monarchy's world, if a baptism isn't in the church records, it doesn't count, not in terms of spirituality, but in terms of palace recognition. Think of it like this. You can have a wedding ceremony anywhere.
Everything that Prince Harry does attracts a lot of publicity, and that would be totally counter to what the King and the other members of the royal family are doing.
But if you don't file the marriage license, you're not married in the eyes of the law. That's what happened here. Lilibet had a ceremony, but without Church of England records, she didn't have that connection to the throne. For Meghan and Harry, this probably seemed ridiculous. They baptized their daughter with clergy present. Why should paperwork in London matter? But that's the thing about the monarchy. It's built on these details, these official records. You have to do it in the specific way the palace recognizes. Otherwise, it doesn't count. So the parents saw a beautiful celebration. The palace saw a ceremony without church records, just a private family event outside the way they do things. And here's where it gets significant. That missing church connection, it's one of the 3 requirements from 1917. Legitimate royal bloodline, official palace recognition, and Church of England baptism. Without that third piece, the foundation starts looking shaky. You've got Archie with a changed birth certificate, Lilibet with an unacknowledged birth, and now both children baptized outside the Church of England's traditional process. When you put them all together, the changed records, the missing church records, the ceremonies happening differently, the palace's silence starts making sense. The parents saw celebrations and personal choices. The palace saw things missing from their records. The parents thought they were creating their own path. The palace saw them stepping outside the traditional requirements. And that disconnect was about to become a massive problem. So here's where things get really personal. All of this wasn't just about tradition. It was about identity, Meghan's identity, and everything she'd built since marrying into the royal family. From the moment Meghan became the Duchess of Sussex, her entire public image wrapped up in that royal connection.
I also worry about the children, because there's going to come a point when they're going to say, why haven't I met my grandfather on either side?
She was Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, mother of royal heirs. That identity powered everything. Every interview, every documentary, every public appearance carried this message. This is a woman connected to the crown. Even after moving to California, that connection stayed central. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, all of it relied on them being royals who left, and at the center was motherhood. Meghan as mother of royal children. That's what made people pay attention. But here's the problem: that entire identity depended on the palace's recognition. Without that recognition, without proper ceremonies and records, Meghan's royal motherhood started looking different, less official, less permanent. For someone who'd built an entire brand around being royal, that distinction was huge. Every business deal, every media opportunity after leaving, all of it had more value because of that royal connection. Her entire post-royal career depended on maintaining that connection, even from California. But when the palace stops recognizing that connection, when they stop recognizing your children as royal, the foundation starts to crack. Harry saw this happening. He watched his children being left out of everything that made someone officially royal. He tried to do something about it. According to the transcript, Harry called his family, not as a prince, but as a father asking for understanding. He probably thought his family would bend. That love would win over tradition. These were the Queen's great-grandchildren. Surely blood mattered more than paperwork. But the response was ice cold. This is about tradition, not feelings. The monarchy's rules mattered more than family relationships. None of it outweighed the requirements from 1917. For Harry, that must have been devastating. He believed they could have both, freedom for him and Meghan, but royal recognition for Archie and Lilibet. The palace had other ideas. Quietly, they started making changes. Palace insiders began updating records, not publicly. Just quiet edits to the royal registry, names removed, titles ungiven. This wasn't temporary, they were making permanent changes. Taking Archie and Lilibet out of the records, taking away their place in the line of succession. Not because the children did anything wrong, but because the process hadn't been followed. It was the quietest way to handle it.
But all you want to do as parents is protect them. And so as we can see what's happening in the online space.
No dramatic announcements, just absence. Names that didn't appear, titles never granted. A blank space where Archie and Lilibet might have been. When you look at the official royal records now, they're just not there. Not because someone made a big show of removing them, but because they were never included in the first place. For Meghan, Watching this must have felt like watching her entire identity shift. The royal mother whose children weren't recognized as royal, the duchess whose heirs weren't treated as heirs. The palace did exactly what Meghan and Harry had always accused them of doing. They acted without emotion, without bending the rules for family. They followed their traditions and proved that tradition really does matter more than feelings. Records matter more than relationships. So here's where we land. After all the change certificates, the missing records, Harry's phone calls, what actually happened? For years, people called Meghan and Harry royal rebels, the couple who left but kept their royal status. They were rule breakers, the modern royals who wanted to do things differently. That image worked for them. It made people pay attention. But here's the thing, you can only be a rebel if the thing you're rebelling against still claims you. Once the palace stops recognizing you, once they disconnect your children from the royal family tree, you're not a rebel anymore. You're just outside. And that's exactly what happened. While Harry and Meghan were busy telling their story, the palace wasn't fighting back with words. They just stayed quiet. The palace never responded to accusations, never addressed the questions. They didn't need to. They managed the official records. They could simply not recognize things, not include names, not grant titles. Every time Harry and Meghan did an interview, they were working with visibility, making noise. But the palace, they were working with silence, with record keeping and documentation. And the palace's approach worked. While everyone focused on the public drama, the palace was making changes that actually mattered. Quiet updates to their records, names that didn't appear, titles that weren't granted. They just waited for requirements to not be met. Then they acted, maintaining standards, following requirements, keeping the bloodline documented. Harry and Meghan wanted to bring change to the royal family. They thought they could keep their royal status while changing how things worked. But the monarchy had a different response. Instead of bending the rules, the palace just disconnected them. No drama, just quiet disconnection. It's like the palace said, okay, you don't want to follow our ways. You're not part of this anymore. The cleanest break possible.
For some time now, at least a year, that there is reconciliation is the goal. It is the aim. We've seen it in the way that there's been behaviours in that direction.
And now Harry and Meghan are in California with their mansion, their deals, their media presence. From the outside, it might look like they won, but in the world that matters to the monarchy, official records, documented bloodlines, recognized titles, they're not included. Archie and Lilibet aren't in the royal registry. They're not part of the official royal family tree historians will study. The palace never had to take anything away because those things were never properly given. The process wasn't followed, so there's just an absence where inclusion might have been. Harry and Meghan spent years telling their story. But in choosing their own path, they gave the palace everything it needed to disconnect their children from royal recognition, because the monarchy works on documentation, on following specific steps, on meeting requirements that have existed for over a century. Every time they did things differently, California birth, private baptism, distance from palace oversight, they were making choices that felt like freedom, but looked like not following requirements. And the palace doesn't get upset, it just doesn't recognize it. And so now you've got Harry and Meghan seeing themselves as free, while the palace sees their children as outside royal recognition. Both sides probably think they got what they wanted. But the children, they're caught in between, born into royal blood, but not into royal documentation, carrying famous names, but not official titles. The palace proved that quiet consistency beats loud noise every time, that keeping the records matters more than telling the story. You can lose in public opinion and still maintain your standards, because it's about who decides what goes in the official books. Harry and Meghan wanted to be rebels who brought change. The palace let them be rebels by removing them from the traditional structure. And in doing that, they sent the clearest message about what the monarchy really is. It's not a family that changes based on individual preferences. It's a set of rules, documented and preserved, that continues no matter who agrees with it. So here's where we end up. Archie and Lilibet are going to grow up in California. They'll have sunshine, beaches, probably really good schools. They'll be surrounded by love from their parents. They'll have everything most kids could want: safety, comfort, opportunity. In a lot of ways, they're incredibly fortunate. But here's what they won't have. When historians write books about the British royal family 50 years from now, when people trace the bloodline that connects Queen Elizabeth to future generations, when students study the Windsor family tree in their history classes, Archie and Lilibet's names won't be there. Not as footnotes, not as side mentions, just not there at all. That blank space says everything. The palace chose to stick with tradition rather than make exceptions.
The king has, by the way, always been very good. He hasn't responded to any of the jibes thrown at him by Prince Harry in the book, in the interviews and all that.
Records matter more than relationships. Following the requirements matters more than family feelings. It's not about being cruel or vindictive. It's about what the monarchy has always been. Traditions that don't bend for anyone. For the palace, the records are clean now. Everything's in order. The children who didn't follow the proper process aren't in the registry. The titles that weren't properly granted remain ungiven. The bloodline is documented the way it's supposed to be, with everyone who met the requirements included and everyone who didn't, not included. From their perspective, this isn't personal. It's just maintaining standards that have existed since 1917. For Harry and Meghan, the royal chapter is closed. Not with some dramatic finale or official announcement, but with quiet disconnection. They left the palace, moved to California, built their new lives. And in doing so, they gave the monarchy everything it needed to say, okay, you're outside our world now. Their children will know their parents' love, but they won't know what it's like to be recognized as royal. They'll hear stories about their grandmother Diana, about their great-grandmother the Queen, but they won't have a place in that same historical record. And here's the thing that makes all of this so significant. Once the crown stops recognizing you, you're not a rebel anymore. You're not an exile. You're not even a controversy. You're just part of the past. Because rebels exist in relationship to the thing they're rebelling against. Exiles have something they've been exiled from. But people who are simply outside, they're just elsewhere. Harry and Meghan might tell stories about the royal family for years to come. They might do more interviews, more documentaries, more books. They might talk about what happened, why they left, what they wish had been different. And people will listen because their story is interesting, because they're famous, because they have that connection to royalty. But with each passing year, as their children grow up in California and other royal children grow up in palaces, as other births get documented and other ceremonies get recorded.
Everything that we hear about Harry always seems to come from their team. I don't think much comes from the king.
As the official royal family tree continues without Archie and Lilibet's names on it, the connection gets weaker. The story becomes less about current royals and more about people who used to be royal. Former members of the family, people who were once part of that world but aren't anymore. The palace never had to argue or defend or explain. They just had to wait, maintain their standards, and let the documentation speak for itself. And when it comes to public noise versus quiet record keeping between emotional appeals and traditional processes, the palace showed exactly which approach actually lasts. Because at the end of the day, the monarchy puts tradition first. It's about the continuation of something bigger than any individual. It's about records that outlast lifetimes. It's about traditions that survive generations. It's about traditions that continue regardless of individual feelings. Archie and Lilibet will probably live wonderful lives, They'll have opportunities, experiences, and freedoms that royal children living in palaces might never have. They might even be happier for it. But they'll also grow up knowing they came from something they're not part of. Descended from royalty but not recognized as royal born, into a famous family but not included in its official story. And maybe years from now, when they're adults making their own choices, they'll look back at all this and have their own opinions about what happened.
How could they both be on different sides of the country, working for the same team, the way things are now?
Maybe they'll be grateful they weren't raised in the royal spotlight. Maybe they'll resent being left out of the family records. Maybe they won't care at all. But the one thing that won't change, no matter how they feel about it, is that historical record. Because once the palace makes its official documentation, once the names are absent from the books, once tradition continues without including you, that's permanent, that's history. And unlike stories or memories or feelings, official records don't change based on who's telling them. So that's the end of this chapter, not with a dramatic confrontation or a satisfying resolution, but with a quiet reality that'll last longer than any of us, the royal family, will continue. Harry and Meghan will continue their lives in California. And somewhere between those two worlds, two children will grow up knowing their family name, but not carrying their family's official recognition. The palace got what it wanted, standards maintained, records kept clean, tradition preserved. Harry and Meghan got what they wanted, freedom, independence, distance from royal constraints. But the children? They are the ones who'll live with the results of choices they never made. Born into a situation they didn't create, affected by decisions made before they could speak, shaped by records they had no control over. And that blank space in the royal record, that absence where their names might have been, it'll speak longer and louder than anything anyone ever said about them. Because in the monarchy's world, what's written in the official books matters more than anything else. And what's not written, that matters just as much. So that's it. The palace chose tradition. Harry and Meghan chose freedom. And Archie and Lilibet, they're caught in between, born royal but never recognized. Once the palace stops claiming you, you're just gone. What do you think? Drop your thoughts below, and if you want more royal stories, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching.